Alright, here's my M1A stock, painted as you can see. As I was saying just before I turned the camera off, if you were going to paint your M1A stock, and it's not really just the M1A either, it's any type of rifle, because if you ever notice when you get your new rifle, whether it be an M1A or an AR-15 or Remington 700, they come from the factory in a plastic bag most of the time. This one came in a plastic bag, and my AR-15 came in a plastic bag as well. I believe my Remington 700 ADL 243 did too. They come covered in like a protective coating of oil, and that is to preserve them, just in case, you know, like Remington or Springfield were to just roll one off of the line, like a Remington 700 or M1A. They just rolled it off the line, ran a few rounds through it, made sure it was all good, and they cover them in that oil because, you know, that rifle may go into storage because, you know, the gun market may not be going too hot, nobody's buying guns, and it may sit in a storage room somewhere for a long time, or it may just get shipped right off, like which was the case with this rifle of mine here. You know, I got it out of the packaging when I got it home. It was still coated in oil. They had just threw it together. Quite literally. They had just put my M1A together, and, you know, they got done testing it, seeing everything was good to go, put it in a bag, put it in a box, and sent it on its way to my FFL where I picked it up, and now it's here. But if you're going to paint your stock or your whole gun, be sure to wipe them down before you start applying paint. You know, get all the oil off of them, all the grease, all that protective oil they put on them in that bag. And I forgot to do that. I didn't do that when I did it with my M1A the first time. That's why I repainted it, because when I painted it the first time, it had like a little coating of oil on the sides there, you know, on the stock, and I didn't think nothing of it because, you know, it was my new gun. I was just, you know, I was new to the M1A, new to rifles, really. Not necessarily new to rifles, but, you know, new to the whole painting them thing, and, you know, it was my first semi-automatic, and I wanted to, you know, camo it up as soon as I could. You know, I was just thrilled to have an M14. Been wanting one for a long time, and I'd finally got one, and I wanted to paint it. So I went out in the garage and, you know, threw a coat of paint on it, and it wasn't about a year later, and that coat of paint on it started rubbing off real quick. And I learned from my mistake, as you can see here with this one. The only place it's really rubbing off is in the high traffic areas, like right back here where your hand would be on the curve of the stock here, the hand grip of the stock, and up here where your hand goes on the forearm. I'm sorry if I'm stuttering a bit. My allergies are kicking my ass, and my sinuses are all congested, and that's why I sound so nasally. But where it rubs off the most on your stock, on your guns after you paint them, is the high traffic areas, is where your hands go. And see, in contrast to my first paint job that I did, I really need to wipe the stock down because I got some oil on it. And the oil helps the paint come off too. Keep that in mind. I mean, I'm sitting here, you know, I got grease all over my hands, and I've just, you know, touched the part where it's painted, but it's already rubbing off around in here anyway, so, I mean, it's going to come off eventually anyway. But in contrast with my first paint job on my M1A, you know, it was rubbing off real bad back up here, and, you know, it was kind of rubbing off on the buttstock, and it's because I didn't take that little layer of oil off of the stock before I painted it. So I'm telling this to all of you, everybody who's watching, and, you know, as a heads up, when you paint your stocks and your rifles, just be sure to degrease the living fire out of them, out of the, you know, the areas you want to paint, because if you don't, it will rub off a lot quicker than what you had been hoping. And this paint job here, I've had this paint job on it since spring of 2017. And as you can see, the only places it's really wore off, you know, and it's starting to go back bare is the high traffic areas. And that's a big improvement over the first paint job I had on it. Another thing too, and I'm sitting here and I'm kind of, you know, following in my own advice, but be sure with an M1A, you know, I grease the receiver. Be sure to use grease. So I got these up here. Be sure to use grease on your M1As, M14s, M1 Garands. Don't use oil, they take grease. I usually like to use this Outer's gun grease. This stuff is nice. And I think this grease that we got, that I have in it right now, is Rem oil grease, or Remington grease. I think we used all that up. It's gone. I couldn't find it, but there's this here. I think I've used some of this before. But yeah, you know, wipe off this part here too, as well, on the inside. Because, you know, after a while, it isn't instant, but after a while, you know, the grease oil get here on the sides of your stock where your paint job is, and it will over time. It isn't immediate, but over time it will, you know, rub the oil off. But that's just the nature of paint jobs in general. You know, eventually one of these days I will have to repaint this stock again. But the paint job I had on it right now lasted the longest, as opposed to the first paint job, and that's what I was going for. So I hope I was able to help you out with all your questions and answers. I hope I was able to answer some questions that weren't asked. And I hope I was able to help out more people who had the same question but didn't know how to go about it, or hadn't asked it yet. See, there goes my allergies. You know, sinus is messing with my throat. Hay fever's fun. Definitely do not recommend. It's sarcasm to the 9,000th degree. Oh, and here's some before I go. That's about all the, you know, paint run over I got on the inside of the stock. Just right in there. And that don't bother nothing. Because you've seen on my M1A, it's none of the paint got on it. That's why I say, you know, when you paint them, and you paint your stock or your gun, just let it sit for a few days. Set it over the register. Let air blow on it. You know, keep it cool. And if you're going to paint, don't do it on a hot day either. Don't do it on a hot, humid day. I mean, it doesn't really have to be cold. And it don't really have to be 100 degrees, but you don't want no humidity. Humidity messes with it, with your paint job. So anyway, guys, it's been Pliskin by 51mm. See you all in the next video.